Welcome to this edition of MDM's Quicktake. My guest this week, once again, is Mike Marks of Indian River Consulting Group. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you, Tom. It's always fun to kind of hang out. Never know what ends up coming up.
2023 is shaping up as a volatile year. What are the levers that distributors have here over these next 12 months to make sure that they are positioning for setting their companies up to be successful, regardless of what the economic cycle looks like?
I think this economy, it's so frothy and there's so much uncertainty people don't know. To me, there's one thing that I think people miss. And when I was young, back a million years ago in the time of the dinosaurs, when we had a recession, we'd all go into a recession together. If you looked at a bell curve of companies and revenue growth, it had a very small standard deviation. We all grew at the same time. We all shrunk at the same time. But what's happened is that economic cycle is a lot different now. The standard deviation, the flatness of that bell curve, the curve's gotten a lot flatter. We're going to, in 23, you're already going to see distributors are going to have growth rates of 15 or 20%. It's going to be a great year for them because of the market they're in. And there's going to be just as many other distributors that are going to have 15, 20% declines depending on the market. There's so many, what's happened, people have figured out that it's a value chain and it's not just who I buy from in terms of my suppliers, it's who they buy from. And if they can't get stuff, some of us are going to have horrible supply chain issues, others not. So it's like a salad dressing and an industrial lubricant. Everybody just doesn't know what it means anymore. So to me, you just play your game. The big thing that's going to come out of this, those people, if you go back to the early days, when you start to look at how this works, those people that have already started their digital transformation and they're starting to do this transition, the gap between them and those that are still talking about it, anytime there's a recession, nobody's going to start to do any kind of major innovation. They're hunkering down. And so that gap between the innovators and the laggards is going to get bigger and bigger, which when the market comes back, is going to be even more painful for the laggards.
I think we saw a similar thing take place when the pandemic hit. For those who had started down some of this road, even with simple things like going to Microsoft Office 365,
Yep.
They were able to convert and pivot much more quickly. What I think we are in now, 3 years later, is and this is based on a conversation I actually had with Brent Grover, and following up from the great panel that you and Mark Dancer and he were on at the NAW Summit here a few weeks back. But Brent was quoting actually Howard Marks of Oak Tree Capital Management,
one of my heroes,
who Warren Buffett pays attention to. But the quote that Brent pointed out for me was, and this is from Howard Marks: "In my 53 years in the investment world, I've seen a number of economic cycles, pendulum swings, In my 53 years in the investment world, I've seen a number of economic cycles, pendulum swings, manias and panics, bubbles and crashes, but I remember only two real sea changes. I think we may be in the midst of a third one today." And he was referring back to the 80s and the interest rates and the climate, and we're coming back into somewhat of a similar situation in terms of forever we've been on this really low interest rate environment, and all of a sudden this is a very different environment. So I just mentioned that because I think this next year really is going to define, and because of the factors of inflation, of interest rates, regardless of whether they settle at this point, I don't think anybody thinks it's really going to come back down to what we've seen 3 or 4 years ago. It really changes the equations on all these aspects about how distributors remain profitable.
Yep. And the other thing is with the interest rates going up, the era of free money and private equity firms using 70% of debt to finance a deal. And I mean, those things are all gone now. And I don't think they're going to be coming back, because when you look at the work that you guys have been doing and sharing on reshoring and the things that are happening, there's a lot of this stuff that's all come together at once. So it's going to be very difficult to figure out what's going to happen based on what happened in the past. It's not going to go back to what it was. But the whole answer to any of that, anytime you're in uncertainty, is just to be light on your feet and be responsive and be innovating, right?
Okay, we've done a great job of identifying what the problems are. What are the opportunities for a distributor over the next 12 months to really move forward?
I think of three things. The first, and obviously not naming names, but I've got two clients right now that have long tenured senior executives that should have been terminated several years ago. And it's blindingly obvious to all the coworkers and even the owner of the company, but they just can't bring themselves to cut this loyal, long tenured, highly paid executive out. And the thing is, if you're going to be going into a tough economic time, if you're going into combat, I want clean weapons, I want lots of ammo, and the two idiots in the platoon, I want to get them transferred out. I want to be ready to go. And it's going to be a whole lot harder if they wait for the economy to get bad and they're faced with a layoff and the rest of it, that they've still got this huge ticket thing out. Plus that other person, if you once set them loose, is going to have a much harder time finding a job in a recession than doing it now. I mean, that's one. People need to, if loyalty is a substitute for competence, the issues that really marks out a lifestyle business versus a professional. And that's the first one. The second thing, and McKinsey just put out a big study, which I thought was really interesting. And their conclusion for distributors in 23 is that this is going to be a war for talent. How do you get, with all the stuff we're talking about, hybrid work and all the chaos that's out there, A players will work for A players, right? So if you got a C player manager, they're never going to hire an A player, and an A player wouldn't stay working for a C. So, I mean, this whole thing about what happens, we have taken employee handbooks, human resources policy, and we put a bunch of rules in place to allow incompetent managers to hide behind rules and say, this is the way we do it, instead of treating people as humans. The companies that are doing really well pretty much turn out their employee handbooks, and they're treating people as people. So you can say, I don't like millennials, I don't like Gen Zs, and they don't want to work, blah, blah. You can talk about all you want. The issue is, do you get the talent to actually capture and retain the customer? So get rid of the plateaued execs, start to figure out what you're going to do so that you can actually be a good place to work. And if you're the CEO and you're the owner of the capital, as well as being the CEO, nobody's ever going to tell you what they really think about the company. So, I mean, there's all kinds of things people can do to get better, but they have to decide to do the work. And then the third thing to me is that you can't ignore what's happened with this explosion of AI in the last 30 days between what Google's doing, the giant war that's starting, that OpenAI started between Microsoft and Google about who's going to win the search. I mean, you can go to ChatGPT now, and just anybody can go there and start to play with it, and it's scary. I think people need to be looking at this digital transition, and if you haven't started, boy, you're going to be really hard pressed if you lose a year because you have a tough market trying to get back. It's like you'll recognize it, but if you're so far behind, how can you catch up?
Somebody was sharing with me the other day that they did they were playing around with the Chat GPT, and they did a search on what are the top 10 challenges for distributors, and they were blown away by what it came back with.
So yeah. It's just absolutely amazing what's happening with this. And the little contest where the 13-year-old kid won the art contest in Milwaukee. Did you hear about that?
No.
This is Dolly, which is the visual version of ChatGPT. Yeah. And the kid won a painting contest. And then when the kid showed up, turned out he was only 13 and not experienced artist. And he did it with Dolly with like 4 lines of code to win it. And then so all the other artists said that you can't give him the contest because it's just not right. So the whole thing ends up being a joke. So this is going to change so fast right now that if people aren't looking at it, they're going to end up being unpleasantly surprised by their competitors doing stuff.
Maybe this will put all the consultants and media companies and distribution out of business.
That'd be really cool. What I think is going to happen here, is, I'm on the board of a university, and the universities are all freaked out because there's no watermark in ChatGPT. So they're all worried about students writing papers, and ChatGPT can actually write better papers than most of the undergraduate students that I've been working with. So there's a lot of folks, it's going to have a real impact on middle management and organization structure. A lot of this stuff, as workflows get done, it's going to change things amazingly fast. I'm really excited about it.
Yeah. But Mike, it's one thing to say, get rid of your plateaued executives, but and then bring in some new talent. But how do you build that bridge? I mean, how do you fill that vacuum? I mean, how do you approach that practically?
Well, the senior executive's a different thing. I mean, I go back to Ben Horowitz's book. He's another one of those guys like Howard Marks that's worth following. And what Ben Horowitz did, and he wrote a book called The Hard Thing About Hard Things. you changing senior executives is a whole different thing than actually trying to build a pipeline to becoming a good place to work. It's basically the problem with senior executive incompetence is the executive leader that's not really leading. So that's, you got to stand in front of the mirror and have to talk with yourself and then write a letter and put yourself on probation as a CEO, building up the talent in your company so you get the right people is a whole different thing. And it has a lot to do with you have a good onboarding experience, and that's not orientation. I mean, there's all kinds, we could have a great conversation or even do a webinar on onboarding. There's some really world-class stuff out there that doesn't cost a lot of money. So you got to get people on. The first 30 days they're in the job has a major impact on how long they're going to stay.
Yeah.
Most companies just ignore it. My first territory was an ROW territory because all the good sales guys gave up all their crappy accounts and gave them to me. And my first boss said, this is kind of like the trial by fire. You either field sales, you either got it or you don't be a man. This is back in the 70s where the world was politically correct. And he gave me a yellow pages and said, go sell. And that was considered to be, you had to go do that. That's not the way to do things anymore. I mean, Rufus Barkley used to make new college graduates unload loads of pipe without any tools. And if they came back the next day, they'd hire them, So, I mean, those things are ancient history and they're good stories, but they're just not relevant anymore. How do you create a place? People are loyal to their coworkers, not to the company. That's the main thing that happened with the millennials. People haven't paid attention to it. So this lifelong employment is if I have a group, I'm going to be with the group for a long time. It's rare to have one or two people. I mean, there's old ones that'll age out, but people are loyal to their coworkers. So how do you put something in and that says you have one lousy coworker, right, sitting down there and they're poisoning the rest of the group? You have to have the leadership to take it out, and most people lack it. So you just have to become a good place to work.
What I'm hearing you say is that over the next 12 months and going forward, culture is really going to be the defining competitive advantage.
And culture is basically what's the most egregious behavior that a CEO will tolerate in an organization. And that defines the culture. It's not the posters they put on the wall. It's not any of this other stuff. It's what is valued, what is respected, what gets people rewarded, gets them punished. It's actions and deeds.
Yeah. Mike, as always, pleasure to talk. Look forward to our next conversation.
It's always interesting, Tom. Look forward to the next one.